I am so excited for this Saturday that I made the cutest earrings ever. Okay, made is a bit crazy because these are just keychains that I converted into earrings. So the story that I'm about to share with you kind of stems from this urban legend in Mexico about this smiling lady in the metro bus. So although there had been so many instances, so many stories about this smiling lady that people have told, this guy says that his entire family knew about this lady because of their grandmother. So this is what happened to his grandmother in 1996. I was 6 years old. So his grandmother was on the metro this day. She was standing up, just staring out the window, kind of dazed, you know, trying to get wherever she was trying to get to. So as the metro was going through this tunnel, the grandmother was still looking out the window, and she could have sworn that she saw something really strange. She saw a lady in that tunnel who was smiling from ear to ear, looking directly at her. The grandmother said that when she saw this lady smiling, she felt really strange, like her vibe was off, but she also thought, hey, maybe this lady was looking at everybody on the metro, like there shouldn't be anything weird about it. But then she started to like really overthink, and she's like, wait, why would this lady just be in this tunnel? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Maybe I imagined it, maybe I was just dozing off that I thought I saw this lady smiling. So she's thinking maybe her brain just made this face up, like there was really nobody in there. But that was when this kid who had been standing next to her turns to look at her and say, did you also see her too? I would have been like, bitch, what? No, I didn't see shit, it was just you. But anyway, this is a story that the grandmother had passed down to the entire family, and this is why they knew that the smiling lady was real. So now the guy who is telling us this story says that he had never gotten on the metro until he was 15 years old. And the reason why he got on the metro was because on his birthday they had given him a free trip, so he wanted to go to the capital. His family also went with him, and they actually made a lot of stops on the way because they wanted to go to the very touristy places. So this was on his third day of the trip, and on that day at nighttime they were going to return back home. He explains how him and his entire family had been talking, had been laughing, but little by little they all started to get really tired and they all got very quiet. He said that the way he was sitting had his back facing the door where people were coming in and out of. When the metro stopped at the next location, he says that he felt when somebody had came in through where they were, and then when the metro left, he felt when the person had left outside the door again. He claims that it's very difficult to explain what happened here, but it went from being quiet just because everybody was tired to being eerily quiet, like almost too quiet. When he turns to look at his siblings and his cousins, he notices that they're all staring beyond him, and beyond him again is that exit. He explains that their faces looked like they were scared, but more so in shock. When he decided that he was going to turn to look at what they were seeing, the metro kind of hit a curve and it made him not see whoever was standing there, but he saw almost like a shadow move away from that exit. Those like split seconds that he can see the shadow, he said that it looked like somebody was standing there looking at them, and then when he tried to turn, it just went away from view. After the metro passed that curve and is now going straight, they all noticed that the person who had been standing there watching them was now coming through that hallway towards them. He says that the person looked like they were walking really slow, but at the same time it was moving extremely fast towards them, like he couldn't explain how that was happening. Without anybody saying anything, they all got up and started walking towards the front of the metro, and in the next station they actually got out very scared without telling anybody anything. When they all got off, they noticed that other people in the metro got off too, and they were all looking at each other really weird, like almost like if they had also experienced the person. Now, he says that even though he didn't see this person very clearly, what his cousin and siblings said and described her was the exact same lady that the grandmother had seen back in 1996. He just remembers being really scared at that moment because up until that point, the only story that he had heard was of the grandmother. But after this instant and what his cousins and siblings had told him, he was so surprised when he went on YouTube and found a video titled "The Smiling Lady in the Metro." It was in that moment where he knew that this has not just happened to like their family, it happened to so many other people as well. I would probably never get on the metro again because what are the odds that a couple of your family members have seen this lady? Like, shouldn't this be like a special circumstance where only a few people see her? I don't want to see her. I don't want to see her walking towards me, moving like really slow but really fast at the same time, smiling from ear to ear. What would have happened if she caught up to them? That's my question. Actually, I don't even want to know. I'm scared.
Parents, what weird or creepy stories do you have about your child's imaginary friend? I have a lot of parents, especially moms, who enjoy watching my content, especially late at night whenever they're like rocking their baby or feeding their baby. So I want to give the moms something really scary to listen to tonight. So let's read about some creepy shit kids have said. My daughter started saying Bob before she ever learned how to say mama or dada. She would say it all the time at random times. One time I was in the nursery rocking her to sleep when she said it, so I asked, "Who's Bob?" She pointed up at the corner of the ceiling behind me. In the past, I have seen things out of the corner of my eye and glanced to see nothing there. Of course, that's just my eyes being weird, and I stopped paying attention to those things. Well, my daughter is just a toddler, and I had her sitting on my lap reading a book. I see something in the corner of my eye as usual, and my daughter quick looks over there. She then stares wide-eyed at nothing and watches it cross through the room. This happened 3 times. She's not at the point to where she can communicate what she's looking at, but we are pretty close. If it happens again, I'll ask her what she sees.
What if we don't want to know?
My daughter had one named Water Pour. She lived with my daughter when she lived in the purple house. We have always lived in the same house, by the way. A few days/weeks later, she told me about how sometimes people have brown skin, like she did when she and Water Pour lived in the purple house. Water Pour also doesn't have skin because it burned off. Not really an imaginary friend, but something still creepy. I don't know if it counts, but I want to share. We briefly rented a townhouse while waiting to purchase our house. While living in this townhouse, I had always felt creeped out by my bedroom. It had a wall of windows on one side. Even as a grown woman, I felt uncomfortable being in the room after dark, and I felt like I was being watched by something in the room. I never mentioned it to my daughter. Fast forward to us living in our own house that we bought. My daughter starts having nightmares and is scared to be in her room. One night I asked her about the nightmares. She said it was of a ghost that said that he followed us from the room with all of the windows. This next one is so freaky. Purple Mommy. When my son was first learning to talk, he would tell us about something called Purple Mommy. It could be an imaginary friend, but these details are a little creepy. Here's a few of the Purple Mommy details. Purple Mommy is all purple with long hair and bright white eyes. Purple Mommy picks him up at night and turns off the lights. We would often find my son out of his crib in the morning, which would mean him crawling over the railing and to the ground, at a time when he was barely walking. Definitely found the lights in his room off a few times too, even though he's terrified of the dark. Also, Purple Mommy needs a bandage because she has blood everywhere. Purple Mommy also has no smile, meaning no mouth. Purple Mommy can take her head off, and Purple Mommy really doesn't like Daddy. He told us all of this stuff for maybe a year or a little more. If we ever asked where she was, he'd always point to the same spot, a corner of the room behind his open closet door. He would also wake up crying almost every night during this time. Once, during a really rough night, my wife went to ask him what's wrong, and his answer was, "Purple Mommy won't let me sleep." Youngest daughter one time asked us to keep her bedroom door open because her imaginary friend couldn't open doors. We laughed it off that she was just afraid and wanted to be able to see us or know we were home if she woke up in the middle of the night. Next day, I casually asked her what her friend did at night, and she said she liked to stand at the end of our bed and watch us sleep. Creep alert number 1. We asked how often she speaks with her, and she said she really only likes to talk and come out at night. Creep alert number 2. We asked, "Can you draw a picture of her?" She did. Super creepy drawing, and we asked what was up with her smile, and she said she had really sharp teeth and a lump on her head. Anyways, we eventually got a dog, and she told us that her friend didn't like the dog because he stared at her at night. Long story short, we eventually moved. Her friend didn't come with us, but daughter said she'd probably find us. That was 8 years ago. Haven't heard about her since we moved. We moved one more time since. I'm hoping she's lost. My daughter was 4 and had 2 friends when we lived in a rental house. One was named Samantha. Samantha would insist on staying in my daughter's room most of the time. Then my daughter would say that Samantha has to go to bed, and we asked where her bed was. She very nonchalantly told us she leaves the house when it gets dark and goes out the back door and sleeps under the grass. We opted not to investigate any further. The other was a man that she called monstrous or something close to that. He was very nice, according to her, and had long black hair and wore tan pants and funny shoes with no shirt. She said he was usually covered in blue and white, and according to the kid, would come and walk around the house in the yard, hang around and listen to music if we had some on, and would stand in the front yard until morning. We've since moved out of that house, and she has not uttered one thing about either friend visiting or anything. My daughter used to talk to the man and woman in the mirror when she was smaller. At first, I thought she was talking to her own reflection, but soon after she would start to draw them. One night she climbed into bed with me crying because the man and woman had climbed out of the mirror and were sitting at the end of her bed talking to her. She's 7 now and has no recollection of this, but my God, it still freaks me out. Sweet dreams. Did you know that David Spade was attacked and almost unalived? Welcome back to Creepy History, where we discuss stories from the past that are still unsettling today. And today we're going to be talking about David Spade and how he was attacked and almost unalived. So let's get into it. On November 29th, 2000, actor and comedian David Spade was attacked in his home in Beverly Hills by his personal assistant and friend, David Malloy. Malloy used a taser on Spade during the early morning attack. Between 5 and 6 a.m., Spade woke up to find his assistant in his bedroom, claiming the home alarm had gone off. By the way, David Malloy is 6 foot tall and was around 300 to 350 pounds at the time, and David Spade is only 5'7". He's always been like a skinny man, so the size difference is actually insane. Spade woke up to Malloy in his room, and Malloy punched Spade in the face, then used the taser on him, which did cause some minor injuries. After the initial attack, a struggle began. The two men moved from the bedroom to the driveway as Spade was trying to fight back and escape his attacker. Spade fought hard, which caused Malloy to drop his weapon. Spade ran back into his house, locked the door, grabbed his firearm, and locked himself in the bathroom. He warned his assistant through the door that he'd use the firearm if need be, which prompted Malloy to flee. Spade was treated for minor injuries at the scene by paramedics, and Malloy was arrested that afternoon. Later on, it was reported that Malloy was dealing with mental health issues and was upset about his career and personal issues. In April 2001, Malloy pled guilty to assault and received 5 years probation, community service, and mandatory psychiatric counseling. I also read somewhere that Malloy was like mad at David Spade, I guess maybe for not like getting him a role in something. Which could totally be possible. I mean, Charles Manson flipped out for something kind of similar, like the Beach Boys and their producer, I guess, kind of like befriended him. And then Charles Manson was really upset whenever his music career didn't take off. And he blamed it like on the Beach Boys and their music producer. Apparently, it was their responsibility to launch his music career and they did not. And then I'm pretty sure that's whenever like all of the Charles Manson like unalivings kind of began. I think that was like what flipped the switch in his mind. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So yeah, fame and money, or the possibility of that, can definitely make people do some crazy shit. Anyway, now we both know about the time that David Spade was attacked and almost unalived by his friend slash assistant. Also, if Malloy had been successful, we would have never gotten Joe Dirt, and that is unsettling. Let me know what creepy history you'd like me to talk about next.
This story is about a man who encountered brujas while growing up in Puerto Rico. Apparently, there's a lot of them living there. I'm gonna go ahead and just read his email. Growing up in Puerto Rico, my grandfather only had one rule for me: never go into the woods after sundown. He said it constantly like it was a broken record, but never really explained why. He was never the type to believe in the supernatural. He was a military man, strict, logical, the kind of person who didn't scare easily. So I always just assumed that it was just some sort of like old superstition. I grew up in Fajardo, a coastal town. Most people picture beaches and boats, but right behind the neighborhoods, it turns into thick forests, dense trees, uneven ground, and at night it gets pitch black in a way that just feels wrong. One evening when I was about 14 years old, a friend came over. The sun was already setting, and he asked if we could go explore the woods. I knew my grandfather would say no, so I didn't ask. I just told him we were gonna go for a walk. But as we were leaving, my grandfather yelled out from the balcony and said, "Do not go into those woods past sundown." The way he said it, it made me pause because I never mentioned the woods. But I brushed it off, laughed, and I left anyways. At first, everything felt completely normal, like the frogs were chirping, the trees were swaying, and we followed a trail we had been on plenty of times before. But as it got darker, something shifted. The sound started fading, and it got quieter. Too quiet. Starting to get a little scared. Then my friend stepped off the trail for a second and didn't come back. I waited a minute, then a few more, and this feeling crept in like something was off, so I went looking for him. But instead of finding him, I walked into a clearing. At first I thought I recognized it like a place that had been there, but it was bigger, too big, and something about it felt completely wrong. Then I saw her. Standing in the middle of the clearing was an old woman. From far away, she looked like she was tall, but as I got closer, I realized that she was actually really small, frail even, pale skin, long white hair, but her face, her expression, it didn't look human. It looked angry, like something deeper than anger, like she was possessed. I called out thinking that maybe it was my friend playing a prank on me, but as she slowly turned around, I realized that I was actually a lot closer to her than I thought. Then she lifted her hands. The way she moved wasn't normal. It was too sharp, too fast, like her body didn't match what she was doing. And then she started whispering, mumbling something that I couldn't understand. That's when everything changed. The wind hit all at once, not a breeze, but it was like a force. The trees started bending, the air turned ice cold, and I swear it felt like the temperature dropped instantly. And in Puerto Rico, that doesn't happen. I couldn't breathe right. I froze. I just shut my eyes because I thought something was about to happen to me. Then just like that, everything stopped. No wind, no cold, no voice. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. Just gone. It took almost an hour before I found my friend again, and when I did, he looked confused. He said he never left the spot he stepped into. He said 1 second I was there, and then the next, I disappeared. We ran out of those woods, and the entire time, it felt like something was watching us. When I got home, my grandfather was still sitting outside. He looked mad at first, but then he saw my face, and he went pale. I told him everything. And for the first time in my life, I saw that man scared. He looked towards the woods and said one word. Brujas, witches. He then went inside and started locking every door, every window, something he never did like that before. And that night I saw him praying. He didn't have to, because now I understand some places change after the sun goes down. And whatever I saw that night is exactly why I would never step into those woods again. Have any of you guys ever experienced anything, especially if you happen to have been in the Puerto Rico area? I've been there twice. One of the times I stayed over there, in the place I was staying at, it was near the woods, like it was like kind of deep, more into like las fincas or like the farm area. And I remember late at night hearing what sounded like drums being played like out in the woods, which was a little creepy. Not creepy, it was actually kind of calming. And a lot of like indigenous, it just felt like it didn't feel bad. Have you guys ever experienced anything? Let me know.
So something weird happened to me this morning, and we're going to talk about it. For some of you that may or may not know, I lost my mom a week and a half ago. So knowing the things I know now and doing the things that I do, especially here on this app, and what I do in my investigations, I never really fully expected her, to give me immediate signs or show up in my dream, or if I did or said anything really dumb, like she would like throw a phantom or ghost chancla at me or something. I don't know. But today I took a day off, and usually on my days off, I like to have slow morning. So I make my breakfast and I sit out in the patio and I just have a slow morning with my pup. And while I'm having my breakfast, Otto was here having his breakfast. So with that said, I left the sliding glass door open. And this is a very bad vice of mine. I leave doors open. No, I was not raised in a barn, but that is a vice of mine. Even when the AC is on, I will leave the damn thing open because I kept on thinking of Otto, and I kept on thinking, oh, maybe he wants to come out. Now, while I'm outside, I'm answering emails. I'm on the phone with his vet because we're dealing with stuff with his insurance. So I was like fully locked and focused on this, interaction, going back and forth with these people on the phone and doing some emails. While that correspondence was happening, Otto comes out into the backyard and sits and lays down. Then I want to say another 5 minutes passed and I'm done, doing my emails, getting off the phone. And then I notice Otto gets up and then he goes straight to the patio door. And he starts looking at the door as though someone's there. And I'm thinking in my head, oh, it's probably my husband. He came back home from work a little early. And then I looked at my watch and I was like, no, that's too early. He's not due home for another couple of hours. And then I realized something really crazy. The sliding glass door was completely closed. And I was like standing out here, I was like, how is that possible, Otto? Like when you're out here, you came out, I was still stuck sitting on that chair. There was just no way. And this sliding glass door has been installed almost a year ago. It's new. It just doesn't, it's pretty heavy. It doesn't just slide by itself. And Otto's a freaking dog. Like he can't close the door behind him. So who closed the door? And I kept on thinking it's probably my husband. I came in and I called his name, but then something came into my mind and all I could think of is mom. Because in my head, I can hear her say, "Cierra la puerta, Tami," because I am still notorious for doing things like that. I could imagine my husband watching this video and being like, yeah. So then I reached to my friend Tani, who is a medium, and I told her what happened, and she was like, I'm laughing on the phone while you're telling me this. And she verified that, yeah, that was your mom. And she is going to continue doing things like that because she knows how you are, but in a way, like, she's still watching out for you and protecting you. Like, she's like, I keep on hearing, like, flies are coming in. and they were flies inside. So yes, our loved ones do come back and remind us to close the damn door even when the AC is on. Stay haunted, stay weird, and close those doors.
While we're on the topic of Hollyweird, do I have a story for you? Okay, this is coming from a woman who's claiming to be the side piece of an actor who is publicly in a relationship, but he's telling her that it's not a real relationship and it's just for his public-facing persona. He's also telling her that he's 400 years old and is immortal. Before I get into the story, though, I have to read you a legal disclaimer from my lawyer. This story, as well as all other stories shared on Spooky Scary Storytime, was submitted by a listener and is being shared for storytelling and entertainment purposes only. Names and identifying details have been altered or omitted. There is no way to verify the claims made in this story, and they should be taken as personal experience, not fact. This content does not reflect the views or beliefs of the creator, aka me. Any resemblance to real individuals is purely coincidental and is not intended as statement of fact. Oh, now that all that said, this woman writes me. She goes, hey, I have been seeing this actor since 2022. I have proof. Here's proof. She's in her like mid to late 20s. He's significantly older. He is also single at the time that they are meeting, and they're talking, hanging out all the time, but he's telling her that he can't be in a public relationship with her because he's in a conservatorship. Over the next couple years, they grow close. They're still talking all the time. They're still seeing each other all the time. He ends up telling her that he's falling in love with her. He also reveals personal details about himself, like that he struggles with depression and bipolar disorder. He is honest with her about his relationships. He tells her that he's been hooking up off the record with an A-list singer, we'll say, and said A-list singer is also a lot younger than him. And so the person who sent this story says, oh, I didn't know that she was interested in people like you. I never saw her date anybody like you. And he says, well, she's actually not the age that she says she is. She's a lot older. This conversation is sort of where her relationship with him gets a little bit creepy, because he starts telling her all sorts of things like, well, you know, a lot of people like me are not really our real ages like we say that we are. We're a lot older. I'm 400 years old. I've actually been a few other people in my life. As for example, I have been an old country singer that is no longer with us. And she says, well, that doesn't make sense because he was alive up until X year when you were also alive. And he says, yeah, well, in order to act human, we still have to play different roles. We have to kill off certain characters. At this point, she thinks he's messing with her. So she goes, so you're telling me you're not this person, you're telling me that you're this country singer? And he says, well, I'm kind of both in one, but I've also been other people. And he names another old actor who is no longer with us. And he says, well, I'm also this person and this person who are currently still alive. And she says, well, that doesn't make sense because you have been in movies with this person and this person. He says, yeah, one of them was me and the other one was a clone. At this point, she's hooked. She wants to know more, right? Because she's like, what is this guy going to reveal to me, whether he's lying to me or not, right? But she's like, I'm not really following. And he says, well, I can essentially shapeshift. I can become more than one person, but other people have to stand in for those roles. She goes, well, can you prove it? He goes, how would I prove it to you? And she goes, okay, fair enough. And they stop talking for the night. At this point, they're not together. They are in their respective homes across the country from each other. This is where it gets weird, okay? Because later he messages her and he says, hey, I figured out a way that I can prove it to you. And she says, okay, how are you going to prove it to me? And he says, I will send you a lizard. Go to your back door. And she walks to her back door, not thinking he's going to send her a lizard. And there is a big fat lizard on her back patio step. I don't know where she lives. I don't know if a lizard being on her porch is normal. I don't know if he had her address even. I don't know if he's ever been to her house, okay? But she goes in to get her phone. She comes back out. She's watching the lizard. The lizard runs off the porch and goes like underneath her house. And he texts her and he says, do you believe me now? She texts him back. She said, that could have been a coincidence. And he texts her back and he said, then how would I know that you're wearing a blue and white daisy pattern shirt with your hair half up in a ponytail? That freaked her out, obviously. So she stops texting him as much. She's like, I think I'm just going to go to bed. He's blowing up her phone. He's saying, don't worry about it. I didn't mean to freak you out. I just wanted to find a way to prove it to you. Also, I come to your house sometimes and I protect you while you're sleeping. When she reads this message, all of the hair on her body stands up because she had not told him that about a week before this incident, she was in bed one night. Her dog was sleeping on the bed with her. And she said that she was awoken to the sound of what sounded like somebody walking around her room. Opened her eyes and looked around her room but didn't see anybody, thought she was just imagining it, maybe dreaming, rolled over, heard her dog start growling, and then swore that she felt somebody tuck her hair behind her ear. She doesn't tell him this. She doesn't text him back, but he texts her again and he says, I actually really love you. I don't want to scare you. I want you to know that I'm protecting you from things that are evil. I'm not evil. I'm just what I am. Little more time goes on. She's slowed down on how much she's talking to him. Obviously, she's still kind of talking to him. Hasn't seen him in a minute. He's still trying to talk to her any chance he can. She's kind of keeping him at an arm's length, though. But then it comes out that he is in a public relationship. And so she's like, that's weird. You didn't tell me you were in a relationship. And she starts to call him out on it. And he says, that's not really a real relationship. It was essentially a PR move because there have been some other headlines about him coming out. And I can't really say much more than that. This new relationship is essentially to distract people from those headlines. She said, I don't know if he's a narcissist who is lying to me and just seeing what he can get away with telling me and what I'll believe, or I don't know if there's any truth to this. But he also tells her that the whole idea of celebrities having clones, they do, but it's not because they've been cloned. It's just that they use them essentially as body doubles. Way to split souls. So she's still talking to him as far as I know. Make of this what you will. And can't prove any of this, can't say that any of this is factual. This is just a place to share stories.
How far would you go to communicate with aliens? Welcome back to Creepy History, where we discuss stories from the past that are still unsettling today. And today we're going to be talking about the lead mask case. On the afternoon of August 20th, 1966, a young boy was flying his kite on the Morro do Ventum in Rio de Janeiro when all of a sudden he discovered two bodies. The boy reported this to authorities, who attempted to respond but had a difficult time climbing the hill due to the rough terrain. Eventually, a small group of police and firefighters reached the bodies the day after they were reported. The bodies belonged to two men who were lying next to each other and were partially covered in grass. Each body was wearing a formal suit, a lead eye mask, and a waterproof coat. There were no signs or evidence of trauma or struggle. Next to the bodies, the police found an empty water bottle and a packet containing 2 wet towels, along with a small notebook which contained cryptic instructions like 1630, be at the specific location, 1830, ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals, await signal mask. What? The two men were electronics technicians from a town several kilometers to the northeast of where they were found. Following the investigation, police came up with a plausible narrative of the men's last days. On August 17th, the two men left their town and boarded a bus to their destination and arrived at 2:30 p.m. According to evidence, the waterproof coats were purchased at a shop there and 1 water bottle from a local bar. One of the waitresses from the bar was interviewed, and she said that one of the men appeared very nervous and she noticed that he was frequently checking his watch. That's about the last time they were seen alive. It is presumed the two men went directly from the bar to the spot where they were discovered. There were no obvious injuries discovered at the scene, nor later at the autopsies. Unfortunately, by the time the autopsies were conducted, the bodies were too decomposed for reliable testing, so it's unknown what they had in their systems. Okay, let's get into some theories. Some of the theories include foul play, UFOs, and another interesting theory revolves around the testimony of a friend of the two men who claimed they were members of a group of scientific spiritualists. This theory suggests that the men were attempting to contact extraterrestrials or spirits using psychedelic drugs, and believing that such an encounter would be accompanied by blinding light, the men wore those metal masks to shield their eyes. This theory would also go on to suggest that the two men OD'd. So what theory do you believe? I don't know if I believe that they OD'd. I looked it up, and if they truly did take psychedelics, it's like really hard to OD on psychedelics. I mean, although it is possible, it is very rare. So, I mean, it could have happened, but I don't know. This is such like an interesting and confusing case. Whatever happened though, I do absolutely believe that they were attempting to contact aliens, or maybe they did. Maybe their spirits went on with the aliens and their bodies stayed behind. Maybe they did contact the aliens and the aliens unalived them. Or maybe they did OD. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know what creepy history y'all want me to talk about next.
All right, so this story is so freaking weird. The man telling the story says that what he's about to describe was the strangest occurrence of his life. He says this happened when he was about 9 years old, but he can still remember it very vividly. He said he and his dad were visiting family in Nevada. The family lived in a very dry area with a fairly good-sized trailer. A couple days into the trip, he was kind of just hanging outside with his cousin, just digging around in the dirt. He says that at some point he looks up and he sees a field that was kind of surrounded by a barbed wire fence that he assumes was for livestock at one point. He says he notices a guy standing there, and he said that this was like about 300 feet away, so he really didn't get a good look at all the detail, but he could tell in generalities that this was a man standing there. And then he says, cue the weird. When he looks at this guy, he has what he can only describe as an out-of-body experience. He said his body went into like a lockdown and he was no longer seeing through his own eyes. And it keeps getting weirder. He said he wasn't like floating or anything. He was now inside of that man's body. the one 300 feet away. He could see through his eyes, and from that perspective, he could see two little shapes across the field playing. But he says that he could just feel inside that this person assumed that those two things were animals, not children. And he said the worst part of all, he was holding a shot gun. So then he says in that moment, he regains consciousness in his own body. And he immediately says to his cousin, we got to get indoors now. He said he offered no explanation to his cousin, who likely thought he was nuts, but they hightailed it out of there. He also said he didn't tell anybody else because at the time he didn't really know how to articulate it, like to explain what had happened. And then he said he's only since then told his brothers, but he's pretty sure that they don't believe him. He said it still freaks him out to this day because it was the only time in his entire life that he literally lost control of his body. He said it almost felt like it was a dream and like it was happening in super slow motion. Well, that's a new one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you have a weird or creepy story of your own, I would love to hear it. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time.
So what's going on with the vampires in New York City? Lip stain on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. Fright Night Files. I got this email from this guy named, we'll call him Zach. He works in Upper Manhattan at this 24-hour pharmacy. And he said that over the last month, he's noticed something really strange going on. So it started off with this man that would come in like 3 or 4 times a week about a month ago. And always between 2 and 3 a.m., he would buy glucose tablets, for diabetics that you can get over the counter, a protein bar, and a bottle of water. And then he said that he noticed that he was like avoiding the fluorescent lighting. Not that he like was tired or something. He didn't want it in his eyes. Like he was trying to avoid it. And he would go and stand in the back part of the pharmacy by this cooler that's like burnout. He said he didn't really think much of it at first because it is New York City and you get all different kinds of people there, which is like the perk of it being New York City. You never know what you're going to see or what you're going to get. So he just kind of blew it off. Well, about 2 weeks after he initially saw the guy, this woman came in. She had like a gray color undertone to her skin. She bought 6 large bottles of iron supplements and didn't make eye contact with him at all. She just kind of bought them and then turned to leave. And as she was leaving, she made eye contact with the guy in the corner by the cooler, and they both just kind of like nodded at each other. Then in a week span, he noticed 4 different people that came in that resembled that woman. They all had the grayish undertone. They all either bought glucose tablets or iron supplements. 3 days ago, he had to go out in the middle of his shift and take some stuff to the dumpster. When he goes out to the dumpster, he sees that one guy that came in all the time sitting between 2 of the 5 that had came in with the grayish undertone. He said they weren't doing anything like dangerous or doing anything really that looked like they weren't supposed to be doing anything. But the guy, the original guy, was sitting in the middle, and he said the only way to describe it is he looked drained, like completely gone of color, but he was awake and he made eye contact with him. So he didn't really know what they were doing. He didn't want to get involved. So he said he just went back inside. He didn't call the authorities or anything like that because he said, what was I supposed to tell them? That it was just people hanging out near the dumpster? 2 nights ago, the original woman came back in. She came up to the counter where he was working. He was the only one in there. And she just locked eyes with him and just said, don't. And he said she had cat eyes, like slits, like what people say mine look like. He asked her, don't what? And she just said, don't, and turned around and left. So he looked up some stuff about vampires on the internet, as one would do, because he was kind of, wigging out a little bit. And he said that he found that in Europe, when original like vampire lore all started, that they wouldn't just right away, that they would drain you for a while before they would move on. So is this what they're doing? Like, why were they buying all of those iron and glucose and all of those things? Like, what's going on? If you're in New York, have you noticed anything like that? Any grayish toned people in the middle of the night? Never heard about vampires in New York City before. So is this a new thing? Has this always been there? Let me know what you think and what you know.
Let's read another scary story. This one was submitted by Roger, and it is titled The Cowboy Story. I don't know if the story I'm about to tell falls under a paranormal encounter, a glitch in the matrix, or simply the imagination of a young child combined with a very superstitious family. But in my family, this has always been known as the cowboy story. For a little background, this happened when I was about 6 years old, growing up in LA. My family lived in a duplex. Our elderly neighbor, Annie, was also our landlady. Behind the duplex was a detached garage that had been converted into a small residence where Annie's younger brother, Felix, lived. The first incident happened one Saturday morning. I know it was a Saturday because I was sitting on the couch watching what I still consider the greatest cartoons ever made, good old 90s Saturday morning cartoons. My parents were in the backyard, probably getting ready for yet another carne asada, which was a regular event at our house. My younger sister was asleep in her bedroom. Out of nowhere, the front door suddenly swung open and an older man wearing a cowboy hat walked into the house. He looked at me, gave me a little smile, or maybe a smirk, closed the door behind him, and casually walked toward the back of the house. At the time, I assumed he was just one of my parents' friends arriving early for the barbecue. In our house, people came and went all the time, so I didn't think much of it. A little while later, I turned off the TV and went into the backyard where my parents were sitting by themselves, relaxing. I asked them, "What happened to the cowboy?" They looked confused and had no idea what I was talking about. When I explained what I had just seen, my dad immediately ran into the house to make sure my sister was safe and that we hadn't just been robbed by John Wayne. But everything was normal. The door was locked, nothing was missing, and there was no sign that anyone had been inside. About a week later, something else happened. My mom had just taken me out of the bathtub while my little sister was still bathing. She wrapped me in a towel and set me on her bed to air dry. While I was sitting there, I heard a very distinct whistling sound coming from inside my mom's closet. I didn't see anyone, I just heard someone whistling. When my mom came back into the room, I told her what I heard. Understandably freaked out, she grabbed both me and my sister and ran out into the backyard. She told Felix what had happened, and this sweet man in his 60s, with a bad back no less, went into the house to check for any intruders. Once again, he found nothing. The house was completely undisturbed. Then there was the third incident. One day I was walking toward the backyard to play. My dad had one of those old aluminum storage sheds, the kind people usually keep lawnmowers and rakes in, but my dad had turned it into a little office. He had a desk in there and his boombox. Again, this was the 90s. As I walked toward the backyard, I saw a man in a cowboy hat standing near the shed. I can't say for sure if it was the same man I saw the first time, but my mom always believed it was. I calmly walked back inside and casually told my dad what I had seen. My dad immediately ran outside, ready to fight whoever dared disturb his collection of Vicente Fernandez vinyl records. But once again, when he checked the shed, it was locked and exactly as he had left it. No one was there. Those are the 3 experiences I remember. Now, I come from a Mexican family and I have a lot of very superstitious Catholic aunts and cousins. Over the years, this story has basically become family folklore. Everyone has their own theory about what happened. Most of my family believes I had some kind of paranormal encounter with a spirit. My dad's side of the family believes it might have been the spirit of my grandfather, who died in Mexico 7 years before I was born, so I never met him. I'm not sure why the spirit of a man who died in Mexico would be visiting me in LA, but I've learned to keep an open mind. Growing up, I'd only seen pictures of my grandfather when he was young. Recently, though, I found a photograph of him later in life, and interestingly enough, he was wearing a cowboy hat. My mom was also told at one point that our landlady Annie had an older brother who died in that house before we moved in. But honestly, I think someone may have just been trying to mess with my mom. So there you have it, 3 strange encounters that mostly survive today through the constant retelling of the story within my family. Now that I'm an adult in my late 30s, I'm not entirely sure what to make of these memories. What bothers me most is that I don't remember more. And sometimes I wonder how much of what I remember is real and how much has been reshaped by hearing the story told again and again over the years. I do believe the core of the story is true because I remember experiencing these moments. But I still wonder how much of the detail is actual memory and how much might just be my brain filling in the blanks with things I've seen in movies over the years. Thanks again for submitting this story. I think with these types of stories, I always like to believe that these are spirits from previous loved ones that are coming to visit. And I don't think, too, that a spirit has to only revisit the place where they died. I think that they could be connected to people. Like for me, I don't live in the place where my dad passed away, but sometimes I do feel his presence and his spirit around me. But this is super interesting and also nice to have a not super spooky story. As always, if you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
Nephilim is a rabbit hole that I fell down after someone sent me the story of what their grandfather encountered in the Hindu Kush in Pakistan. They said that their grandfather was a guide in the Hindu Kush. Now, the Hindu Kush is extremely remote, rough terrain, plays tricks on you. Being a guide in the Hindu Kush, that's a generational thing to know these passes. And this place, yeah, while it's remote, like it was part of the Silk Road. So these families have known this area for generations. But what her grandfather saw actually scared him so bad that their family left the region. He stopped guiding hikers. It was done. So her grandfather is guiding 2 hikers through the Hindu Kush when the story takes place. And they're walking, and in the snow, he starts to see footprints. As he's looking at them, he is thinking, okay, this is just snow melt. It's just melting in this weird pattern or some type of erosion. But as they go on, these things, these depressions, begin to look more and more like actual footprints. And her grandfather said that they were about as big as his leg. Her grandfather is paying attention to these footprints. He's following them and he's looking ahead and realizing, like, these are in a pattern. These are definitely looking like steps. That's weird. He looks up, and ahead of him, way ahead of him, this thing is not close. He says that he sees what looks like a giant humanoid. Not a Bigfoot, not a hairy thing, but like a giant humanoid. He could see that it had long hair, it was wearing clothes, couldn't make them out, but just way too big. My grandfather said this thing definitely looking at him and these two hikers that he is guiding. As this thing is looking at him, Grandpa says that everything just goes completely quiet. The wind, he can't even hear the snow shifting beneath his boots anymore. Grandpa is not taking his eyes off of this thing, so he's watching it way up ahead. Without even turning around, he says to the hikers, back up and back up slow. The hikers obviously are seeing this too. They do not question it. They back away until they're at a little bit of a safer distance. He tells them, we cannot go forward. We're going back. These two hikers that Grandpa is guiding, they don't even argue. No problem. They hike, they trek it all the way back to the big, they're done. After this encounter, her grandfather no longer wants to be a guide in Pakistan, no longer wants to go in those mountains, nothing. They move away. While this story is not a first-hand account, and please understand that with every story that comes in, these can come from anywhere. These can come from anyone. So belief is always going to be your choice. But what I find interesting about it is that there are so many reports of people seeing giants, Southeast Asia, in the Middle East. There's that story online about U.S. soldiers who encountered a giant in Kandahar in Afghanistan. Now that is alleged because there are no military reports that support that this happened. People will say, well, I heard the first-hand account from the soldiers who were there. Still not, that's not verifiable. So allegedly. Now, when I hear the word giant, I think of biblical giants. I think of David and Goliath, the Nephilim that God sent the flood of Noah to wipe out. But it says in Genesis, in that time, there were Nephilim, giants, and then after, which leads you to believe it just wasn't effective. The Nephilim are mentioned in the physical Bible 2 times, once in Genesis during the flood, and then once in Numbers when Israelites go to spy on Canaan and come back and report that those people are Nephilim. They were so large that we felt like grasshoppers. Well, that's the only 2 times that the Nephilim are mentioned in the Bible. Giant and giants are mentioned multiple times. David and Goliath, for example, and Goliath had brothers who were also said to be giants. There's also King Og, who is said to have had a 13.5-foot bed that was 6 feet wide just to accommodate his size. If you want to dive deeper into it, you can read the book of Enoch, which talks about how the Nephilim came to be, what they taught us, the Watchers. However, this is not considered scripture or biblical. I think Enoch is mentioned in the Bible once. So what scholars and theologians will say is that someone saw the name, took it, ran with it, wrote a book, and made it their own historical text or historical scripture. But the book of Enoch goes into detail about fallen angels coming down to earth, mating with human women, creating the Nephilim. They're called the Watchers. It also says in the book of Enoch that these fallen angels taught humans things that we weren't supposed to know, such as blacksmithing, aka how to create weapons and swords, also about astrology and things like that. Deep diving into the book of Enoch will be an entire series that I just can't do right now. And arguing about what books should or shouldn't be included in the Bible is not something that I'm going to get into right now. I am not a theologian. What I find interesting is that in the Bible, giants are mentioned. They existed. There were even said to be tribes that were giants, not like a big tribe, but like big people. If the flood didn't wipe out all of the Nephilim, if they were still mentioned after the Great Flood, or if, as some people believe, there was a second incursion of the fallen coming down and mating with human women, or others believe that the wives of Noah somehow carried this giant gene that then, spread unto the earth. Who's to say that they're all wiped out and not hiding somewhere or in remote places like the Hindu Kush? I don't know. Like I said, as with all stories that come in, belief is your choice. These can come from anyone. What you think about that, that's completely up to you. I'm just here to tell the stories, and you take it with a grain of salt. You do with it what you will. And Kate sent us an email to tell us about the time that she encountered the snarly yow of West Virginia. And she said, yeah, Kate's my real name. You can use it. I know what I saw. She said that this happened in 2022 in West Virginia, where she lives, and she said that in West Virginia, they have what they call kiss your ass turns, or S-turns, as you kind of come through the mountain. So she's coming through one of these S-turns. She said it's a little after golden hour, so there is still a little bit of light. It has just rained. And as she comes around this curve, she realizes that standing in her lane is the biggest black dog that she has ever seen, but not naturally big. She said that she was driving a Nissan Altima at the time, and this thing was easily as big, if not bigger, than her car. She said it had fluffy black fur, red eyes, and looked like it had a mean snarl on its face. She says that as she is approaching it, to look into her windshield, it actually has to bend down So it bends down, looks inside her windshield at her. She says that when her and this thing make eye contact, everything goes completely silent. She said, I can't hear myself breathe. I can't hear the radio. I don't hear the tires squealing. I don't hear my heart racing, even though I know I'm panicking. It's complete silence. And she actually just braces for impact and kind of swerves into the other lane to not hit this thing. After she swerves and corrects her car back into her lane, she looks and this thing has just vanished. It's not there anymore. After this, Kate is terrified. She's just trying to focus on getting home, getting back to her husband, her newborn baby, and she does make it safely. She walks in the house, she's crying, she's terrified. Her husband is like, what happened? What's going on? And she's kind of like, you're probably going to think that I'm crazy, but this is what I saw. And she said when she told him, she expected him to not believe her, like any person would if you tell them that you saw something like this. But her husband says that he absolutely does believe her because he works in the mines, and he says that he has seen some things in the mines that he cannot explain. But Kate, her husband, they really want to figure out what this thing is, so she says she ends up calling her sister, who is super into the paranormal. Love that. Love that. She's talking to her sister, talking through everything, and she's thinking, okay, sister suggested hellhound. This could be maybe what it is. Looks into that, doesn't quite fit. So she starts Googling West Virginia cryptids, and she says that what pops up is something called the snarly yow of West Virginia. She clicks on it, looks at the picture, and she's like, yep, that's exactly what I saw. Reports of this cryptid have been around in that area since the 1700s. So she's thinking, that's what I saw, or at least some sort of like a cousin to this thing, because this was not just like a Great Dane on steroids. It was as big as a Nissan Altima. She says that she has lived on these S-turns her entire life, still lives there to this day, has never seen this thing again. Definitely doesn't want to, but she says, I know exactly what I saw. If this is a cryptid that you would like to look into, it is the snarly yow, Y-O-W, of West Virginia. My captions, for some reason, never pick up correctly because I speak too fast, so I hope that translates. I think I'm actually going to do 2 stories today, and our other one is going to be about the little white men of Appalachia. So I'll see y'all later.
The Shanghai tunnels are a series of tunnels underneath Portland, Oregon. Now, they go back to the 1800s when they were actually built and used to Shanghai people. Now, a lot of creepy stories have came out of the Shanghai tunnels. This is one of them. Now, there was this man named Sean. Sean grew up in Portland, Oregon, and he worked downtown. And one day when he was going to work, he ran into this homeless man named Eli. And he felt really bad for him, so he gave him $10. Well, he continued to see Eli, and they end up becoming friends, and he would constantly give him money like here and there. Well, one day he was downtown and he runs into Eli, and he gives him a couple bucks, and they start talking. And he asks Eli, like, hey, have you ever heard of the Shanghai tunnels? And when he asked Eli that, Eli just kind of like tensed up and started shaking and was like visibly scared. And he's like, yeah, I know about the tunnels, but I don't like to talk about it. I had a friend who went down there, and he said he encountered something, and he seen something down there. And after that, he was just not the same anymore. And Sean was like, but I thought they blocked the tunnels off and you couldn't go down there. And Eli's like, there's a spot over here, on this one street. And like, I know a secret entrance and how to get to these tunnels, but I will not go near there. So a couple more times he runs into Eli, and he decides to ask him, hey, if I give you $100, would you take me down to the tunnels? And Eli's like, no, man, I will not do it. Like, I won't go anywhere near there. So a couple weeks later, he's downtown, and it's late at night. He bumps into Eli again. And Eli's like, hey, man, do you got that $100? And I'll take you to the tunnels because I really need the money. And he's like, okay, yeah, like, here's the money. Like, show me the tunnels. So he takes him a couple blocks, and he takes him behind this building. And there was sort of this dark doorway. And he said above the doorway was this graffiti that said, no return. And he said that just kind of freaked him out because it was like they were going into somewhere where there was no return. And they then began walking down these dark set of stairs. And they found themselves in this maze of tunnels. So they make their way down all of these different corridors. As they're walking down this one particular tunnel, they start hearing crying. And they're like, where's that coming from? Like, what is making that sound? And it then began to sound like someone was just literally like wailing. And that's when they shined their flashlight and they stumbled upon like a hole in the concrete, and it led into a room. So they walked into this room and they started to look around with their flashlight, when over in the corner they see this black looking wolf dog type creature, and it's growling at them. So they take off running. They're terrified. Sean couldn't keep up with Eli, and he ends up getting lost in one of the tunnels. So he begins just walking around in the dark, like, Eli, like, where are you, man? Like, I'm scared. Like, where are you? And that's when he hears something, like a footsteps moving in the dark. So he shines his light directly in front of him, and he said he sees this woman hunched over, and she's bawling. She's crying. And he's like, ma'am, are you okay? She doesn't say anything. Takes a couple steps closer. Ma'am, are you all right? And he said, all of a sudden, this woman stood up, turned around, and she had no face. And this terrified him, so he took off running again, and he's like screaming and stuff. Eventually, he thinks he sees the shadow of his friend Eli. So he's like, Eli, man, like, come on, let's get out of here. Like, I'm terrified. Come on, let's go. And he said the shadow walked into like one of these chambers along the tunnel. So he walks over to this chamber, and he goes in, and he's like yelling for Eli. He looks around. There's no one in this chamber or room. And he said that's when all of a sudden he felt a cold breath breathing on his neck, and he knew there was someone standing behind him. He slowly turns around, and he said standing there was what looked like this 1800s miner wearing some kind of lantern on his head, and he had a noose around his neck. And he just took off running as fast as he can, and eventually he did find his way out of these tunnels, and he was just like terrified. Well, a couple days later, he runs into Eli on the streets, and he's like, yo, man, are you okay? Like, what happened that night? You know, did you see anything else? And Eli's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, what's going on? And he's like, you know, the other day when we went to the tunnels. He's like, the tunnels? What are you talking about? I don't go to the tunnels. And he's like, no, we went down in the tunnels together, and we seen that like wolf thing. And he's like, you must be losing it, man, because I did not go down in the tunnels with you. The most aggressive and the most terrifying of all the types of Bigfoot to me is the Tennessee wildman. Now, the Tennessee wildman is thought to be almost more man-like than ape-like. And this thing can run really fast, it can climb trees, and it's said to resemble a very hairy man. Now, some people have, linked them with being just feral people who lived in the woods, but people who've encountered these things say these are not human. Whatever these are, they are something else. Now, the craziest story that I heard about the Tennessee wildman came from the Smoky Mountain National Park. There was this avid outdoorsman, avid hiker named Mike. Now, Mike had been to the Smoky Mountains hundreds of times. This particular time, he decided he was going to hike this one trail, and it was the middle of winter. Now, it's never a good thing to go out in the Smoky Mountains in the winter because you do get very bad weather sometimes. But he, had trained and done survival training, so he was pretty well prepared. Well, he happened to be out on this trail, and he was a good, 10, 15 miles out, when all of a sudden he encountered like a very big freak snowstorm. And he said, he knew he needed to find shelter immediately to ride out this storm. Well, tucked in between this ravine and one of these mountains, there was a cave on the side of the ravine. So he hikes over to the cave, and he said, this cave was probably 6 foot tall by 6 foot wide, and you could kind of walk in it and go back a good distance. So he goes inside the cave, and he puts his gear down, and he builds a fire at the base of this cave. So he said he just sat down up against the wall and was like, I'll just sleep and wait out this snowstorm. He said after an hour, after it had gotten dark, he was sitting in the cave, and he said all of a sudden he heard this very loud howl, like scream. And he had known like all the wildlife in the area, and he said whatever this was, it was something different, and it just gave him chills instantly. He said this howling went on for maybe 3 minutes, and then it stopped. About an hour after this, he said he starts hearing like rocks falling in front of the cave. And he said it sounded to him like someone was standing above the cave on top of this ravine, walking around. And he said all of a sudden, he started to hear that screaming and howling again, except it was getting louder, and it was kind of echoing through this ravine. And he said whatever it was, he could tell it was outside of the cave. It was moving around because he could hear it. And then all of a sudden, he said, off the fire, he could see shadows outside the cave moving around like really, really fast. And he said just this howling just kept getting louder and louder. And at this time, he's thinking whatever this is going to come into the cave, so I need to defend myself. So he said he pushed himself up against a corner in the cave, and he pulled out his hunting knife, and he was sitting there waiting for whatever this was to come in. And he said, it must have lasted about 10 or 15 minutes, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And he said he waited there for about an hour for something just to come in, but nothing ever came in. And he eventually said he calmed down, he relaxed, and then he fell asleep. The next morning, he goes outside of the cave, and he said the snow had stopped, but he said there was this huge pile of rocks stacked in front of the mouth of the cave in this sort of like weird formation, and it wasn't there the day before. And he said after that, he would not hike at night in the Smoky Mountains.
There's a Walmart in Galveston, Texas. It's probably the most haunted place in America, and most people don't even know that it's there. Now, you have to understand the history of Galveston, Texas. In the 1900s, there was a giant hurricane that basically put the whole city underwater. And you had over 6,000 people who passed away. Now, where this Walmart is built, during that time of the hurricane, there was an orphanage. And when the hurricane hit, it completely put the orphanage underwater. 100 people at that orphanage passed away. 90 children and 10 nuns. And it's said that the spirit of those children still haunt that Walmart to this day. Now, if you go to this Walmart, you'll notice that it's kind of eerie. And they close at 10 p.m. The people that work there do not like to stay late because a lot of weird things happen, such as toys turning on by themselves, hearing children's laughter, seeing children running through the aisles. Now, there was a story from one of the workers who worked the night shift. They were restocking the children's area where the toys are located. And as this worker goes over to their pallet, they begin to hear children laughing, and they hear all these toys turning on. So they go over to this aisle, and they see about 6 or 7 children playing with all the toys. And they're dressed in 1900s looking clothing. And so this employee runs and gets the GM and tells him, like, hey, there's something weird happening in the toy aisle. So the GM follows this employee to the aisle, and when they get there, there's no children. But there are all these toys laid out on the floor as if someone was playing with them. So what do you think? Is the Walmart in Galveston haunted?
On the afternoon of March 4th, 2000, a 40-year-old woman named Ines Ramirez stood in the kitchen of her tiny one-room home, which was deep in the mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico. Ines had a whole chicken on the counter right in front of her that she had just killed and plucked, and now she was using a 6-inch long knife to butcher it for their dinner. And as she did this, every once in a while, she would look out the window to check on her 7 kids who were playing together out in the yard. So Ines and her large family lived in a very isolated rural community of about maybe 500 people. They didn't have running water or electricity or a phone, and they lived miles away from their closest neighbors. They mainly lived off of corn and vegetables that they grew themselves, chickens they raised, and then wild animals that Ines's husband would catch. Her husband was actually gone that day because he was out in the mountains hunting for deer. And so as Ines is just kind of going about her fairly typical evening routine here, making dinner, she suddenly felt this really intense, very painful cramping sensation that was kind of ripping through her abdomen. And it hurt so bad that Ines stopped what she was doing and kind of doubled over and grabbed the counter and just tried to steady her breathing. I mean, this was really shocking. And for about a minute, Ines just stood there, holding onto the counter, just waiting for this pain to pass. And eventually it did. And once it eased up, it was like, okay, she was back to normal and she could stand up again. But this was sort of alarming. But at the same time, Ines was used to dealing with basically all medical crises on her own. They lived in this isolated part of the world, and the nearest medical clinic was 50 miles away, and they didn't have a car. So, like anything that happened, they basically had to deal with it themselves, and that was routine. And so for Ines, despite how incredibly painful this was, she just told herself, now that it had passed, the pain was gone, she said, you know what? It's probably fine. I'm good. And so pretty quickly, she just kind of forgot about it and went back to butchering the chicken. But several hours later, this is after midnight now, the pain came right back. And at this point, Enos, she's in this one common room in her house where all her kids are fast asleep. It's past midnight now. And she's sitting on this bench and she's gripping her abdomen, rocking back and forth as this pain just rockets back and forth across her abdomen constantly. There's no relief, nothing. And she's trying so hard not to make a sound because she doesn't want to wake her kids up, nor does she want to scare her kids. Her husband is still off in the mountains hunting for deer, so she is alone. She just has this little flickering candle nearby. That's the only light she's got, and she's just isolated, dealing with this excruciating pain. And so at this point, Enos really felt like this could be a real problem. This might not be something she could just brush off and let pass on its own. This was real. This was an actual emergency. But what can she even do? There's nowhere to go. She can't do anything. She is just completely trapped here with this excruciating pain that's making it hard to even have coherent thought. It's so bad. But the one thought that kept going through her mind was she had to do something, or whatever this was. It felt like it was going to kill her. And so Enos felt like she really only had one option here, and it was a horrible, horrible option. But she knew she had to do it. And so she got up and she's hunched over in pain, and as quietly as she could, she walked over to a cabinet and she opened it up and she grabbed a small bottle of alcohol and she took a few sips to kind of numb the pain a little bit. And then after she had done that, she turned around and, still with this blinding pain, she hobbled into the kitchen and she grabbed that 6-inch knife she had used earlier to butcher the chicken. And then she walked right back over to the bench near that candle that she'd been sitting on earlier. And once she was there, she reached down and she pulled up her shirt, exposing her abdomen, where this pain was coming from. And then she took the knife and she plunged it into her abdomen. And immediately she let out this blood-curdling scream. She couldn't help it. And she was sort of vaguely aware of all her kids waking up and sort of making their way over to her, but she was so focused on what she was doing, and she began slowly dragging this blade down her abdomen all the way to her belly button. And then she pulled out the knife and she can barely think. It's so painful. Her kids are crying. And then she plunged the knife back into her abdomen and raked it down the other side, creating this massive gash in her stomach. And then she kind of dropped the knife and she's screaming. She can't even help it. And her kids are all crying. And she takes her hand and she reaches into her stomach and she's fishing around. Every little move is like lightning striking her body. But she eventually finds what she's looking for and she pulls it out of her stomach. And what she's looking at is her 8th child, a baby boy. And she had enough wherewithal to take that knife and cut the umbilical cord and place the baby down before she passed out. After Enos lost consciousness, one of her kids left the house and just started running to go find the nearest person to get some help. And miraculously, after finding some people, when those first responders got to the home where Enos was hours later, they found her and her newborn son alive. And they were taken to the closest hospital for emergency treatment, and they would both make full recoveries. Today, Enos Ramirez is the only woman ever who has performed a successful C-section on herself. At about 8:20 in the morning on June 29th, 2025, an 83-year-old woman named June Baxter shuffled her way down the hallway of her small home in Attleboro, which is a quiet town in eastern England. As she walked, she had to keep one hand on the wall to keep her balance. She was pretty frail these days and also just had a lot of medical problems. But she also really valued her independence, and so she was determined to keep living alone, even if it was kind of risky. So June used to live with her husband and their dog. But about 7 years earlier, her husband had gotten really sick, and so because of that, they'd had to give their dog to their granddaughter because they just couldn't take care of it anymore and also care for him. And then unfortunately, June's husband did pass away, and so she was left all alone. But even though she was, all alone in terms of living in the house by herself, she wasn't completely isolated. Her granddaughter, who she had given the dog to, lived close by and visited a whole bunch, and almost always brought along June's old dog, which June loved. Now, in addition to just being good company, June's granddaughter also regularly made herself available to help June with all sorts of basic things, like, picking up her prescriptions and going grocery shopping for her and, driving her to and from doctor's appointments. Like, she was really available to her. But despite June knowing that, knowing she could always call on her, she tried hard not to call on her granddaughter, because again, she just really liked being independent. So on this particular day, she, continued slowly walking down the hallway, guiding herself by holding onto the wall. And then she turned the corner to go to the bathroom. And when she stepped inside, she slipped on the tile. And as she was falling to the ground, her leg scraped the corner of the bathroom counter. Immediately, June's leg started bleeding, and June's yelling out in pain, but she lives alone, nobody can hear her. And so June quickly went from, just reacting to the pain and the blood. June was scared. I mean, this is the exact scenario that she was so worried about, getting hurt when she was all alone, because she didn't really have a plan. It was like, I'm going to live alone, so help me. But fortunately for June, she had installed throughout her house all these emergency call bells that would allow her to basically, hit the bell, and they were programmed to contact both her granddaughter and also the local emergency services. And in the bathroom, there was one of these bells. And so once she kind of composed herself a little bit, grabbed the string for this bell, and she pulled it. About 10 minutes later, June was still in the bathroom on the ground, holding onto her leg wound, when she heard the front door of her house swing open. And immediately she heard the sound of her granddaughter calling out for her. And June, as best as she could, even though her voice was a little bit weak, she called out and said where she was. A moment later, June's granddaughter, along with June's old dog she'd brought along, came bombing around the corner, and they looked into the bathroom, and they saw, June and her horrible leg wound, and clearly the granddaughter is really worried right away. I mean, this was a very bad cut. But, for June, she's looking at her granddaughter, and she's just flooded with relief, because she knows no matter how bad this is, her granddaughter is here, everything's fine, and also her dog was here, which made everything better already. And so while June's granddaughter began rummaging through the bathroom to look for some bandages, June just kind of relaxed and just began petting her dog, who was clearly very worried about June. This is her dog previously. They had a very strong bond. And so she's just petting her dog, and then, June's granddaughter did find some bandages, and she wrapped up June's leg. And then by the time the paramedics got there, June actually was feeling basically okay. I mean, her leg definitely hurt, but she was very calm at this point. A couple of minutes later, the paramedics arrived, and by this point, June was actually feeling basically back to normal. I mean, her leg definitely still hurt, but again, her granddaughter had put that dressing on it and basically stopped the bleeding, and also June has her dog that she's petting, like her comfort animal. And so she was very calm. Paramedics come in and they assess her and they take off the dressing to check the wound. And after they cleaned it, they said, look, this is a pretty minor cut. You don't even need stitches. I think you're okay. Just be careful and maybe have your granddaughter stay here for a little bit just to make sure you don't fall again. But you're okay. Like, we're going to go. And so June, she thanked the paramedics as they walked out the door. And then she and her granddaughter and the dog just sort of sat there feeling grateful that this fall wasn't more serious. However, the next morning when June woke up, she knew something was wrong because, all she's doing is laying in bed, but her heart is racing, she's sweating, she's lightheaded, like clearly something is off here. Now, the day before, after the paramedics left, her granddaughter did stick around for a little bit, but really, June was okay, and so June was alone. And that night, she had some soreness around the cut, but it really wasn't that serious. She really felt like dodged a bullet there. But now, 12 hours later, something's going on here. Now, June had no way of knowing if her current symptoms were indeed connected to her, minor cut on her leg. But her concern that maybe this was serious and could potentially spiral really quickly made her not pull on one of those emergency bells, but instead she just picked up the phone and called an ambulance to take her to the hospital. When she got to the hospital, doctors immediately began running all these tests on her. And very quickly, they determined that she did have a very severe bacterial infection, which she must have gotten after cutting her leg. And unfortunately, that infection had already spread into her blood, which would explain why she was feeling sweaty and lightheaded and why her heart was racing. Now, the medical staff definitely had some questions, like how in the world could this have developed so quickly, especially after the paramedics the day before had, at least according to them, properly cleaned this wound before they left. But, their issue now was not how did this happen, but instead just stabilize June, treat her. And so right away, they began treating June with general antibiotics to try to fight off this infection. But it just wasn't working. And June was 83 and already in relatively poor health, and her condition was clearly deteriorating rapidly. So the doctors began running more tests to try to determine exactly what type of bacteria was causing this infection. Because if they knew that, they might be able to give her more targeted treatment than just general antibiotics, which clearly were not working. And they did eventually identify this bacteria. But by the time they did, June had unfortunately already developed sepsis, which is a life-threatening condition that occurs when a person's body tries so hard to fight off an infection that it basically ends up damaging their vital organs in the process. Medical staff did everything they could, but it wasn't enough. And so eventually, 1 week after going to the hospital, June passed away. It would turn out the deadly bacteria that found its way into June's open wound was introduced to her by her granddaughter, completely by accident. The bacteria is called Pastorella multicida, and it's found in a very specific place, inside the mouths of domestic dogs. While June laid on the bathroom floor waiting for her granddaughter to find bandages to wrap up her leg, June's old beloved dog, who her granddaughter had brought over, was trying to comfort June, and June was allowing the dog to do that. But what the dog was actually doing to comfort June, was licking her open wound. And so that led to the bacteria going in, and it would kill June 1 week later.
This story is actually a story about my uncle, who recently passed away, actually. This guy is probably the most fertile person I've known in my entire life. I'm talking about every woman that he gets with, they end up getting pregnant by him. This dude passed away recently and left 11 kids behind. But there was one woman that he actually, got with that we knew our entire life. And we, we actually, look at her like she was like part of the family. She was an aunt, and, we treated her like family. No matter what he was doing outside of his door, getting with other different women, getting them all pregnant. She couldn't get pregnant by him, but she was the wife material. They lived together, they had a life together, but they couldn't bring a kid into that part of the family, the main part of the family that we know of. This lady was so sweet, no matter what was going on with the whole relationship. We always treated her like she was family. She's always wanted to have a kid on her own, like a family, with this guy, no matter how many other kids that he had. And they tried to go to different doctors. They tried to go to different cities in Haiti or different parts of Haiti, trying everything that they could naturally. Until, she actually brought up to my uncle that she once actually was pregnant. And then she gave birth to the baby, but in about 3 months, the baby actually passed away. And then she was always grieving that loss on her own, she kept it a secret. And then she brought the idea to my uncle that maybe, if she goes to a voodoo priest that she knows, she can actually talk to him, pay him, and then he can actually do some kind of ritual or some kind of prayers or some kind of magic for her to reach out to the soul of that baby, and actually convince that baby to be born again, for a second chance, so she can actually get pregnant by the same soul of that baby that she actually lost. Do you get where I'm going? Literally. Do you see how dangerous that is? Do you see the massive of darkness, of portal that she tried to open? And guess what? She actually did. So, my uncle actually took on that offer. And then I remember, because the whole thing was actually in the open to the whole family about what they're about to do, because they want to get pregnant so bad. They want a baby in that family so bad, and she cannot get pregnant, and she feels like it's because she lost a baby, at that early of an age, 3-month-old baby. Then she thinks that's why she never moved on from that baby. The baby never moved on, never really detached. There was never a detachment. She felt like if she goes to a voodoo priest, she can attract that same soul, to, into the dynamic of the family, and then give birth to the same soul. But it's a different baby, but same soul, So she actually managed to drag my uncle to that idea. And then they went to a place where she was actually born and raised. It's called Guamon. If you're Haitian, you know where exactly I'm talking about. And the English translation is Big Mountain. But it's Guamon for us, in our language. So I remember, even myself as well, my mom actually dragged me up there with her, my uncle, and my dad, a couple of other family members. We went up there for the first time. You have to park your car underneath the mountain. It's called Big Mountain for a reason. The people actually live on top of the mountain. And then when I tell you, like, when you get up there, it's like a different village. You feel like you're like in the 1800s. You know, everything is like, there's no technology, there's nothing. These people, like, they dress, they live, they breed like it was like the 1800s. There's no growth at all. And then they believe in everything. They believe the tree is speaking to us. They believe the sun, you know, brings different like life and energy to us. Like at night, they feel like if you look at the stars, certain things gonna happen to you. Very fascinating, especially to me as a young kid. And I remember that day that they decided that they were gonna go to the voodoo priest. My uncle did not like the idea, but he ended up like, you know, just like follow on because, again, he got so many kids with other women, so he just wanted to have one kid with that lady, and they can be a complete family. So they decided to do that. You know, they went around. You know, they went to the voodoo king, and then they did what they had to do, pay him and everything. And he said, you know what? Tonight you're gonna go home. You're gonna go do this. You know, be private. You know, get with your wife and do whatever you guys gotta do. You know, and wait about, you know, like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. You know, you're gonna be pregnant. And just like that, she was actually pregnant. Oh my God, miracle! Everyone is happy. The entire family is happy for her. Everyone is just like, like I'm talking about. Like they were just like. This was a miracle, like literally a miracle by God, that she is pregnant and she's gonna give birth to the same soul, you know, but like different baby. She's happy. She's reconnecting with the baby that she lost, you know, when that baby was 3 months old. Okay. Long story short, baby is born. Okay, baby is doing just fine. I remember I used to babysit him. A older cousin of mine as well. We like used to, you know, babysit them together. Like, kid, wonderful little kid, beautiful boy. You know, everyone loves him. So sweet, so calm, so funny. Everything that you could actually get from like a very happy, healthy baby, that was him. And I remember when everything was falling apart too. This is where it gets all sad. There was like reports of like dark shadows, you know, like being seen wherever the baby was. There was report of like, you know, them, like my aunt and my uncle, like they literally beating on each other, like trying to unalive one another. It got really bad in that home. And then, very long story short, guys, I can go into more details maybe in part 2, maybe in the comments. When the baby turned about two years, or maybe 2.5 years, it was myself and my cousin who were left behind, and we were very young as well, very young, babysitting the baby. And we had a well. You know what a well is in Haiti? Like usually, like where we get our fresh water, you know, it's a truck that comes in and they like dump water in a big well, clean well, you know, and then it's usually covered by a little gate. Somehow the gate was left open, and me and my cousin were actually inside. And then like at a certain point that we started to feel like very like unease, like something was actually in the house with us. We were supposed to be babysitting him, you know, and all of a sudden we didn't hear anything from him at all. He was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until like, you know, like something tells us like, you know, like something must have happened, because he's usually running around the house. He's playing with like different toys, and he loved to play with spoons, you know, like with bowls and like everything they can find in the kitchen. Like he's making noise, but like all the noise stopped, and then the house got like really, really cold. And we stepped out in the yard looking for him everywhere. We couldn't find him until, you know, like my mom, my dad, everyone came home looking for him. Couldn't find him. I'm talking about the entire neighborhood looking for him, guys. Until my dad would decided, like, you know what? We look for him everywhere where he could be alive. We can't find him. The one place that we haven't checked is in that well. It was a big well, actually, very deep, I remember. I would just remember my dad screamed out of his lung, and he fell on the floor, fainted, literally out of consciousness. And then everyone rushed up to my dad and checked the well to see what did he figured, what did he found out in that well. Was 2 little legs literally pushing out away from the, you know, like where you cannot see the end of the well. to like the gate, and then it was a neighbor of ours who actually grabbed the little leg and pulled the little leg out, and there you go. Unfortunately, it's the baby. It's the baby. Completely gone. Literally. Drawn. You know, apparently he fell in the well. I don't know if he was the one who opened the gate by himself. The gate was so heavy. A baby could not like literally open that gate by himself. Even myself, I couldn't do it. It was always an adult who would actually be there to open the gate, and then would grab water as it's needed. And you know, till today, we don't know what happened to the baby. And she never were able to get pregnant ever again. They tried again, like for years. My uncle is now gone. That lady is still alive. She still doesn't have any kid at all. And she never went back to that voodoo priest. And then she's always, like, she's actually an advocate to other people now to never try to reach out to a past loved ones. You know, never. Just let them come to you if they need to. She made a big mistake reaching out to this past, you know, baby, the love, you know, like the connection that she had with this baby. It's really like, you know, the mother soul and then the young soul. And then she's trying to reach out to that baby. And then it did not end well. So stop trying to do that, guys. It can be really dangerous. Sometimes you can actually open a portal to a different soul. And it might be very, like I talk about, very evil soul. And most of the times, even if it's just, you know, like it just becomes successful, that you actually end up, you know, reaching out to your loved ones, and you're trying to do that type of ritual, it's still not gonna end up well, neither for you or, you know, like whoever you're trying to reach out to. Let them go. Let them reach out to you if they need to.
I want to talk about another ghost story today, but this one is really tragic. On January 27th of 1967, they tried to launch Apollo 1 from Complex 34 in Florida. The three astronauts on board, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, they all lost their lives in this tragedy. Fire erupted in the capsule, and this would lead to them losing their lives, and I can only imagine how tragic that was. Now, the site itself would become deactivated in 1969, and eventually it would just become completely decommissioned when launch controllers were really superstitious that something like this would happen again here. Now, there had been a successful launch by Apollo 7 in October of 1968, but this didn't help stop any of the superstitions that this could actually happen again. The words "abandoned in place" were spray painted on the sides of this launch pad, and it has been deserted ever since. But you can go visit it. Like, once a day, they will like bus a group of people out there to go visit this launch pad. Here's where things get creepy. There have been several tourists and USAF and NASA employees who have reported hearing screams coming from the launch pad, kind of matching the men's screams during the disaster itself. There have also been sightings of the three astronauts around this area. People have seen Gus Grissom walking around the launch pad, and that to me is terrifying. Other guests have reported that they would feel like overcome with sadness, grief, fear, dread, all of the things that these three astronauts probably felt when they were in the disaster itself. These reports became so bad that they eventually canceled the tours to go visit the launch pad. Now, it is important to say that there have been several visitors to this place, and they have all said that they felt nothing, but others have reported, including NASA employees, which makes me feel like this is probably real. So what are your thoughts? Would you go visit this place? Let me know down in the comments, and follow for more spooky things.
In honor of Women's History Month, I'm doing 31 Days of Women of Horror. If you love mid-2000s horror, chances are you've seen Jessica Stroup. Stroup began playing in horror films in 2005 when she starred in Vampire Bats. In 2006, she starred in the supernatural thriller Left in the Dark. But her biggest role came in 2007 when she starred as Amber in The Hills Have Eyes 2. The film helped introduce Stroup to a whole new generation of horror fans. And in 2008, she had a busy year in horror. She appeared in the HBO series True Blood as a sorority girl named Kelly. That same year, she starred as Claire in the remake of Prom Night, bringing the classic slasher concept to a whole new audience. She also appeared in an independent horror film called Pray for Morning. In 2009, she played Elizabeth in the thriller Homecoming. Another dark, psychological story. Jessica Stroup became a familiar face in the mid-2000s horror genre, and we're hoping to see more from her in the 2020s. Come back tomorrow for my 31 Days of Women in Horror for Women's History Month.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. My name is Kayla, and this experience happened when I was just 11 years old. Back in November of 2017, my family moved out of the apartment that I had lived in for my entire childhood. We didn't move far, just to another apartment in the same neighborhood, but it still felt strange leaving the place I had grown up in. Over the weekend that we were moving in, I stayed over at a friend's house. By the time I came home, my family had already moved most of our things inside and were in the middle of settling into the new place. The apartment still felt unfamiliar to me. Boxes were stacked everywhere, and everything smelled different, like fresh paint and old carpet mixed together. That evening, some of my cousins came over to visit and see the new apartment. We were just all hanging out and talking while the adults caught up in the living room. At one point, I went to the bathroom to wash my hands. I remember standing at the sink with the water running when I suddenly heard a voice from right outside the bathroom door. It sounded like my youngest cousin. He was about 3 years younger than me, and I clearly heard him say something simple. Me next. It sounded like he was telling me he needed to use the bathroom after I finished, so I just called back through the door, okay. I finished washing my hands, dried them off, and opened the door, but no one was standing there. I assumed he must have walked away for a second, so I went into my bedroom where he had been sitting earlier. When I walked in, he was just sitting there calmly playing like nothing had happened. I told him, "Hey, I'm done in the bathroom, you can go now." He looked up at me with this confused expression and said, "Okay." Something about his reaction felt off, so I repeated myself. I said, "I'm done in the bathroom, you can go now." Again, he just looked at me and said, "Okay," like he had no idea what I was talking about. Finally, I asked him directly, "Didn't you just come up to the bathroom door and say you wanted to go next?" He immediately shook his head. No. And the way he said it, it was clear that he wasn't joking. At that moment, I felt a weird feeling settle in my stomach, because that had been my first day in the apartment. I had only been there for a few hours, and already something just didn't feel right. Over the next few weeks, there were a few other strange things that happened in that apartment. Small things that were easy to brush off at the time, but one experience still terrifies me when I think about it. One morning, around 5 a.m., my dad was getting ready to leave for work. He was always loud in the mornings. I remember hearing him walking down the hallway past my room while he was getting ready to leave. I was half awake in bed, listening to him move around the apartment. And then I heard the front door open and close. And I heard the lock click behind him. From my bed, I could see the hallway light shining underneath my bedroom door. He must have left it on when he walked out. At that point, it was just me, my mom, and my 6-year-old brother left in the apartment. I tried to fall back asleep, but not long after my dad left, something happened. Suddenly, I felt something touch my head. At first, I thought maybe it was the blanket shifting or my hair moving, but then I felt it again, slow and gentle and deliberate, like fingers running through my hair. My heart started racing immediately because I knew something wasn't right, and from where I was laying in bed, I could clearly see the light still glowing under my bedroom door. No one had opened it. No one had walked into my room, but I could still feel it. Something was playing with my hair, moving strands between invisible fingers, slowly brushing them back and forth. I remember lying there frozen in fear, too scared to move, too scared to even fully open my eyes. Eventually, though, the feeling stopped. Somehow, even though I was terrified, I eventually fell back asleep. To this day, I still can't explain what touched me that morning, but something else about that apartment has always haunted me. I don't know if it's connected to what happened, but the timing is impossible for me to ignore. Only 1 month after we moved into that apartment, my great-grandmother passed away. 3 months after that, my mother passed away too. Then, within the next 3 months, my childhood dog died, and my grandmother passed away shortly after that. In the span of 7 months, 4 people and 1 pet that I loved were suddenly gone.
and it had all started only a month after moving into that apartment. I've never been able to shake the feeling that something about that place just wasn't right. Sometimes I still think about that voice outside the bathroom door, and the fingers running through my hair that morning, and I can't help but wonder if something in that apartment was there long before we had ever moved in.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
We are now up to 6 reported Bigfoot sightings within 5 days in northeast Ohio. A witness from the Newton Township area had a sighting in their backyard at 4 a.m. this morning, March 10th, 2026. The Portage County reports have now gone over into Trumbull County. This witness is extremely shook up, very emotional about it. I did talk to them directly over the phone. They're wanting to stay anonymous about the entire thing. At 4 a.m., their dog, a German Shepherd, needed to go outside. As soon as they got outside, the dog went ballistic, lunging towards the wood line. The witness heard massive crashing out in the tree line and something like a large black shadow moving through the trees. The witness was clear this is not like a bear that they usually see on their property. This is something way bigger, about 8 to 10 feet tall height. When they finally got their dog back inside, the German Shepherd was literally shaking with fear. Since March 6th, we've had reports in Manawa, Garrettsville, Windham, and now Newton Township. If you are near Newton Township or Newton Falls or the general area and you've had a sighting today, March 10th, please reach out to me immediately. BigfootSociety@gmail.com is my email. We need to know if there's more than one sighting in the area. Stay tuned. This is the most documented Bigfoot activity since the 1970s. Like and follow to see where it goes next.
I've put a guided meditation at the end of this because this might be a hard read to hear. These creatures, these Bigfoot types, cryptids, I think, right? These are beings that are moving out from the center of the earth. They're being pushed out. It's similar to like when a dog can sense an earthquake and it barks or it moves or it alerts, or how birds all leave a location if they sense something coming. This is what's happening, and it's going to continue. And it's because there is an influx of darker alien beings. I talk about this in another video that I don't think I've posted yet, so I better post that. Because of this war, this is beyond just Earth. It's causing darker beings to come in and to try and not take over Earth, because we don't want to remove humans from this equation. Humans are a part of this. They're creating this. They're engaging with this. But these darker groups are coming in and they're saying they're like scorching the earth, like preparing it for something. And they're scorching. And this is like deep into the forest where these Bigfoot type creatures live. And Bigfoots live where we can't access, and they're like scorching it. And I don't know why, and I honestly don't want to engage with this group, but that's what's causing these animals to come out and move towards the city. This is why we're going to be seeing more of them coming out towards these property lines and up towards people. They don't want to hurt anybody, and they don't want to be seen, but they don't know where else to go. So that's why I put this guided meditation at the end, so that we can help guide them, so we can bring down our anxiety level, so we can connect to our guides and make sure that we're all being guided by light during these very dark times. I feel like some of you are scared that you're not going to know if you're following light or not. Just allow yourself to just say the words, angels. I call on my angels of light, my guides of light, my ancestors of light. That's all you need to do. These darker beings coming in, they're not really concerned with us. They're concerned with a takeover with people in the government. So it's not just them, and they're not taking over to take us. They're taking over to occupy. It's just an occupation of Earth. So we want to help these creatures to feel safe and to find a safe place to go. And so in that guided meditation, we're sending them light and guidance so they can find a safe space. So if you see them, they're not trying to hurt you. don't scare them, and don't bring your animals in. They are scared of dogs. Dogs are scared of them. They're not there to hurt. So just, it's like, allow them to do what they need to do. Just sort of turn your head a little bit. Let them do what they need to do. I don't encourage you to grab your phone, although everyone wants footage of this, because that's encouraging like anxiety and fear, and we want these creatures to feel safe and to find a safe space. And the best way to do that is to just be still. And if you can, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you can, once again, bring the dogs in so they're not reacting, or cats, and just center yourself, find your light, call in your guides, call in these creatures' guides, and ask them to be shown a way. These beings do not hurt animals, and they do not hurt people. That's a myth. It's not true. All right. I just want you guys to find yourself rooted, grounded, connected to Mother Earth. This is where these beings, specifically Bigfoot, are coming from. They're coming from the center of the earth. They're used to being nestled by Mother Earth. So let's bring our attention to the bottom of the spine, the sit bones, and let's feel this energy running deep into the center of the earth, locking you in. Allow Mother Earth to hold you, to ground you, to quiet you, most importantly, to guide you. Just take a moment and feel the breath. Placing the right hand over the belly and allowing the belly to move with the breath. Feeling the breath and the belly moving together. Relax the shoulders. Relax the forehead. Relax the jaw. Release the tongue if it's stuck on the top of the mouth. Wiggle the fingers and the toes to make sure they're at ease and not clenched. And bring your attention back into the center of the earth. So we hold the energy in the tailbone, the bottom of the spine. We imagine, see, feel, pushing that energy down into the center of the earth, locking you in, holding you. And you feel Mother Earth wrap herself around you. And you can let go. And within this space of safety, peace, calm, our intuition opens to show us what is to come, what is our potential, and why we are here. We send love. We send light. I'm being shown a light pink light. Feel it coming down around these creatures, calming them, soothing them so they can follow their instincts, follow their intuition, so they can find safety outside of the city lines, feel safe and comfortable in their own homes. As we allow ourselves to find this calm, this peace, we ask our enlightened angels and guides to join us here on earth, to show us how to be the prevalent source, the stronger light, the stronger source, and the guiding light on earth. We ask our angels to be the ones to guide humans, only our angels of light, coming down to earth to show us the way, to show us through the dark, safely, calmly, and courageously. We allow the animals to move to a safe space, and we show the animals through our love and our light a safe space to live, away from society, away from the city. 3 deep breaths. Deep inhale through the nose. Exhale, blow it out. Deep inhale through the nose. Exhale, blow it out. And when you're ready, just be still. Gently open the eyes. And feeling safe in your space, comfortable in your space. Knowing that your connection to your angelic beings are your one and only source for guidance, for protection through these hard times. You've got this.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. So today I decided to change things up a bit, and I decided to give you guys a story time / mukbang, okay? So I have water as well as a toasted cheese sandwich. Let's get into it. Cheers. So this is the story of when I went to go visit this one grandmother who I thought was lonely and sad, and unfortunately for me, this lady had zombies in her house. So what had happened was my mom used to leave. I told you guys before that my mom used to leave and go work somewhere for a good week or 2. And because I was a problematic child, she basically used to send me off to my grandma's house, or sometimes, send me off to like an aunt or a relative's family. But this time I was like, there's this grandma that's very, very sad, because we had visited her one time, and she had no people visiting her, and I just felt bad for her. And so my mom asked me, like, where do I want to go this time? And I said I want to go to grandma's mama's house. Biggest mistake of my life, if you ask me. So as soon as I get there, guys, my mom tells me that I'm gonna be here until, so she takes me there on a Sunday, and she tells me that I'm gonna be here until the following week. No, I'm gonna be here for this week that we're going into, and then the following week she's gonna come fetch me on a Friday. I'm thinking, oh, okay, cool, no problem. So I love this grandma. Every single time I was at her house, there was no problems. It was always fun and games, so I didn't think anything of it. Okay, fine. Get to the house. First day, everything is chill. Like I'm sleeping, whatever. But I noticed that every single time, and at a certain time in the AMs, there's always like movements in the house. Like you can hear people's feet, and it's not just one person. It's multiple people. So I kind of like brush it off, and I'm like, maybe it's people outside. They're coming back from Groove, because people from my province, Limpopo, they drink, okay. So I'm just assuming it's them, whatever, sharp. Okay, that's the first day. Second day, this happens again. Third day, this happens again. And at this point, I eventually just start to notice that, no man, this thing is actually coming. The call is inside the house. I tried to wake up G here because I'm sleeping in the same room as her. And she refuses to wake up, guys. You can see that this person is like, man, let me go. And I'm thinking, bro, like, I'm scared. There are movements in the house. Like, what's going on, And she just didn't care, y'all. Another thing is, I was not allowed to clean the house, nor do anything, like dishes and all of that, none of that. Also, we used to cook like it was not the 2 of us in this house. And those things kind of didn't like make sense to me, because how are we cooking with 2 big pots when it's just the 2 of us? And then before we sleep, we go to sleep, she takes out a couple of plates and then puts them on the table and then leaves the dishes and all of that. In the morning, the yard would be swept, the house would be clean, the dishes would be washed. This time, guys, I used to make sure that I sleep very hard. I make sure that I cuddle up next to this grandma, so that even if these movements start, like, I just force myself to sleep. You know what I mean? And obviously, the reason why I was hearing so many movements was because as these people were doing whatever they were doing, it was multiple of them. It was not just one person. So obviously, they were just doing all the house chores. Some of them are washing the dishes, because you would hear banging as well. At this point, I'm scared, right? Because this one time I decided to wake up at a certain time. I think it was a couple of minutes before all of this movement started. I went to the toilet, guys. So in the villages, we don't have toilets inside the house, right? But we had a bucket. The bucket was not inside our room. Why? Because remember, these zombies were working for this grandma. So this bucket was not in our room because I was not allowed to see them. And they would take this bucket and throw it out for us. And you wake up and everything is clean. Cool. So I go to that particular bucket and I do whatever I do. As soon as I get up, I see people in the kitchen. I'm thinking, what the hell is that? You know, I'm seeing people in the kitchen, but I can't really see who it is because it's like a shadow type vibe. So I go in like that, and I see that these are not people. These can't be people because I can't see the body. And where did you guys come from? Do you understand? They are washing the dishes. They are literally moving. I run back to this grandma's room. Ooh. At this point, I ran back to this grandma's room and I hugged her tightly and I tried to wake her up because I just seen things I wasn't supposed to see. You know, like, hey, like, do we need to pray? Do we need to blah, blah, blah? She refuses to wake up, guys. She acts like she's asleep. Every time I try to nudge her, now she's not doing nothing. Obviously, I think this was like the day 4 or 5 of me being there. Now imagine it's probably a Thursday or a Friday and I'm only leaving this house the following Friday. My mom would call and ask like how everything is, and because that same day I couldn't even speak to her because I feel like this grandma knew what I had seen low-key, and she refused for me to speak to my mom because I was gonna tell my mom what was going on there. So I just had to thug it out, y'all. So now that I heard all of these things, it's hard for me to sleep. Each and every single day I hear these things and I'm so terrified. I was counting down the days to when my mom would come back and fetch me. Do you understand? So now imagine it's probably like a Friday at this point. I go out, see other kids, and I have to go back to this horrific house where things that I cannot explain are happening. Sometimes you hear loud noises outside and I'm just scared. Sometimes eventually these people started coming into the room to clean the room while we're sleeping, and I just had to shut my eyes so tightly, but I was scared. Now, y'all, luckily for me, that particular weekend, the grandma also had children, but those children did not visit her, and I did not understand why. I just felt like they were cruel people because I was young, guys. I was young. So this particular day was a Sunday, right? And this grandma's child came to visit him. The son that knew my mom came to visit his mom. What? So are you guys understanding? This grandma's child who knew my mother, you know, came to visit him. This is the son that we knew the mom through. Do you understand? Cool. So he came to visit whatever, and he found me there. It was a Sunday. Found me there, and he was kind of shocked as to why I'm here. And I explained to him my mom's gonna come fetch me next week, and he was just like, oh, hi. Guy decides, no, let me just take you guys out for a bit, because he wants to question me, right? So he starts talking to me because he had brought his kids as well, like his daughter and I think his son. He starts to question me, and honestly, like, he was digging for information and he was not asking it straightforwardly, and in that way I felt comfortable. And he asked me, like, did you see anything late at night that's strange? And I kind of looked to the side and I was like, no, I didn't see anything. Like, am I supposed to see anything? And he could tell that, you know what, whatever that his mom was doing, I saw. And so he asked me, like, don't I want to come visit them until my mom comes to fetch me? And I'm pretty sure my mom is not gonna have a problem. And I was like, yo, like, yes, please, you understand? Cool. We go to the mall, we have fun, whatever, and then we go back, and he tells his mom that, listen, I'm going to take baby girl here for like a couple of days, and then I'm going to bring her back, and then she's going to leave with us, and then she's going to come back after. Never came back, guys. I lived with this guy, never came back. He immediately called my mom and explained to her, Uguti, hey, like, you didn't know that my mom is a little bit of a witchcraft. You didn't know that. And my mom was kind of flabbergasted, and, you know, they were like, no, they'll just take me to somebody when she comes back. Like, she thanks the son. She obviously thanked this grandma's son for taking me. And I went to their house, guys. When I tell you, when I got to that place, I told them that I am scared of sleeping alone because I'm dreaming of the things that I saw there. And I told the son, and I slept with the son's wife, the man's wife. I slept with the man's wife until my mom came to pick me up, y'all. And I never ever again went to go visit her. My mom didn't want to show her that we know what she's doing, but me, I refused to go. Every single time that she would be like, let's go visit so and so, and I'd be like, nope, because she was trying to, you know, recruit me. Or at some point, apparently the reason why I was waking up was because she was trying to recruit me, and her acting like she's asleep was to get me to go back to sleep so she can wake up and try to recruit me, basically make me take over the things that she was doing. Imagine. Lucky for me, that did not happen, and all I want to say is be careful who you bring your kids around.
More than 45 people are on a plane. It crashes into the mountains. It's a horrific crash. And for the next 2 months, people are trying to survive on top of this frigid cold mountain, and they eventually even resort to cannibalism to survive. On October 13th of 1972, a Uruguayan Air Force flight, it was flight number 571, departed from Uruguay to Chile. 5 crew members and then 40 passengers, and of those passengers, 19 of them were actually part of a rugby team that was pretty well known and popular in the area, and then many of the passengers on this plane actually were like friends and family of the people on this team, and they were going to watch them for a game. So during the flight, co-pilot at some point ends up controlling the plane. He gets confused on where they are. He thinks they have already cleared all of the mountains, so he actually starts to descend and lower the height that they were flying at. Unfortunately, they had not actually gotten past the mountains yet, and he lowered himself so low that he went through a mountain ridge and the wings of the plane were torn off. Obviously, immediately the plane crashes. The fuselage, which is the main body of the plane, slides down a glacier, and now they are on top of this frigid, cold mountaintop. The tail of the plane was also ripped off and separated from the fuselage. Now they are just in the middle of the mountains in Argentina. It is absolutely freezing on top of this mountain. During the crash, 12 people died pretty much immediately. This included several of the crew members and the main pilot, and then the co-pilot who had been flying the plane when this all happened actually survived the crash, but he was very severely injured and he was crushed in the cockpit. Asked the other survivors to end his life with his weapon because he knew he wasn't going to survive and he didn't want to suffer. At the time, no one could bring themselves to do that. They couldn't kill a man right after this crash. And so he ended up dying the next day from his injuries. Meanwhile, people are waiting in Chile for this plane to arrive, and it never does. And so immediately a search starts. Helicopters are sent out. They are surveying the area, trying to figure out where on the path they could have crashed. They can't find them anywhere. And we actually now know in hindsight that they flew over the crash site multiple times. The body of the fuselage was actually white. It blended in with the glacier they had landed on, and they never saw them. At the end of the first day, people are injured, traumatized, scared, freezing to death. And out of the 45 people that had started on this flight, only 33 people are alive. At the end of the second day, the co-pilot ends up passing away, as well as 4 other people. And this whole time, by the way, the other survivors, anyone who wasn't seriously injured, doing everything they can to try to make a shelter out of the fuselage. They took the seats, the cushioning, any luggage, anything that they could to try to block off the open end of the fuselage where the tail had ripped off, and then they packed snow into it. 2 people in particular, Gustavo Zerbino and Roberto Canessa, were medical students, and they started treating injuries with whatever materials they could find. And temperatures, by the way, are dropping down to like negative 30 Celsius, which is about 22 degrees Fahrenheit in the initial couple of days. It's very cold when it is daytime out and they try to go outside. Snow and ice is so reflective, they're actually getting like snow blindness. They cannot see. One guy actually made sunglasses to try to like help them walk around, but they only had 3 pairs. But they're getting snow blindness. They are traumatized and injured from the crash. They are dehydrated. They are now without food for multiple days because the food that they had didn't even last them a week when they very strictly rationed it. And then on top of that, they're getting altitude sickness because they're so high up for so long. They're trying to do everything they can to work together to just get through it and get rescued. And because they're so high up, there's no vegetation and no animals around them, so they can't hunt or forage. So whatever crashed with them is the only food that they had at this point. The group ends up finding like a small transistor radio, and they are able to get it some power. And so they aren't able to send out any signals, unfortunately. They can receive signals coming in. And they actually hear on this radio a broadcast that is saying that the search for this plane crash is finally being called off. And they realize that on this 11th day, people are no longer searching for them. And if they are going to get rescued, they have to get help themselves. No one is coming to find them. And so they're like, what are we going to do? And people start telling each other that if I die, you can consume my body. You can eat it. And people are making this promise, basically saying like, it is okay if you use me to survive. And obviously everyone is horrified at the idea that they would eat their friends or family members on this plane. No one wants to do that. Everyone is refuting that idea. They're like, we're going to figure something out. We're going to find other food. But as the days go on, they are starving. And eventually they do decide that they need to consume some of the people that have passed to survive. They are like retching at the idea, and people have a really hard time even holding down what they try to eat because the thought of it is so horrific. 16 days in, they are hit with another tragedy. An avalanche comes barreling through. 8 people end up dying in this avalanche because they suffocate. So now there are barely 20 survivors left. 4 of the men decide to try to go on an expedition to try to get help, but one of them ends up being too injured to go. So 3 men, Antonio Vizintin, Fernando Parado, and Roberto Caneza, decide to go try to figure out if they can get any help. And they finally end up finding the tail end of the plane. Inside, they find a couple more rations and they find batteries, and they think that they're going to be able to use these for the radio, but unfortunately it doesn't work. They are not able to get any more help. So for another almost month, they survive on this mountain before the 3 of them decide it is time to go out on this big expedition. Based on where the co-pilot thought they were and where they think they now are in the mountains, try to find any sort of help. And so they set out with 3 days worth of their rations to try to go find help. At the end of that first day, though, they realized they gravely underestimated how far they were going to have to go. They send Antonio back to the plane and take his rations, and they continue on. So Fernando and Roberto end up walking for days. Over a week, they are walking, trying to find any sort of help, trying to get off of these mountains. And on the 9th day, they finally are able to get to a low enough elevation. They find a river, and they actually start to find signs of human life. They don't see anyone yet, but they see a river, and they actually see like cattle that is clearly being cared for. And so that means that people are somewhere around here. And of course, they're starving, they're dehydrated, they're exhausted. It's estimated they have walked almost 37 miles at this point. And by the way, Roberto is 19. That's an incredible amount of determination and strength for someone that young, or anyone, to be doing. They decide to make camp for the night. They end up seeing 3 men on the other side of the river. They call for help, but this river is too loud. They can't communicate, and the people leave. One man who was on a horse comes back, and he brings paper and something to write with and a rock, and he throws it over the river, and they write a message. And this is the message that he writes. I'm going to read you the English translation. One of them writes on this rock, I come from an airplane that crashed in the mountains. I am Uruguayan. We have been walking for 10 days. I have a wounded friend up there. In the plane, there are still 14 injured people. We need to get out of here quickly, and we don't know how to. We don't have any food. We are very weak. When are you going to come get us? Please, we can't even walk. Where are we? So the man, whose name, by the way, is Sergio Catalan, is horrified to hear that these guys have been surviving on a mountain and there's more survivors. So he runs off to try to go get help, and he's a hero. He not only ends up rescuing these 2 men, but he helps rescue the other 14 survivors. So the 2 men get rescued. They are now able to be safe while people are sent to go rescue the people on the mountain. And because of weather conditions, they aren't actually able to rescue everyone immediately. It ends up taking 2 different trips, and 4 different people from the rescue crew actually get off the helicopters so that more survivors from the crash can get on the helicopters and get rescued that night. In the end, out of 45 people who had been on that flight, only 16 survived, but they survived 72 days. Roberto ended up going on to be a pediatric cardiologist. He literally spent his whole life helping people, and a memorial now stands on the Andes Mountains